Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Accelerade studio. I'm David Arrell, one of the co-founders of Accelerade, here with my partner, fellow co-founder, and originator of many of the great material that make up our program, David Zeitler.
Hey,
How's it
David,
going, man?
how are you?
Good. Good to see you here.
Yeah, good to be here. Nice to be getting going on this project that we've spent a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears getting up. It's
It
nice.
was at 8 months, 35 years. Who's counting, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's worth noting, right? We met in college, day one, freshman year. We both, despite being in different majors, we both ended up really interested in consciousness studies. And there was no consciousness studies where we were. So we just kind of went out on our own, got some, we each got some advocates in our various programs to help us out. And we ended up going to those conferences on consciousness in Tucson. Uh, Ended up doing graduate work in psychology and philosophy. Then we both ended up joining Integral Institute, which, for those of you who might not know, which is most of you, was a think tank that was trying to bring the best of consciousness studies into the academy at large and the free market. Um, Fast forward 10 years, and, we're both running businesses founded on many of those principles. So we have this shared history as thought partners and friends, and we put all of that into Accelerate. Uh, yeah, our first business since the driveway ceiling business we ran in college.
Yeah, we went from student enterprises to high-end executive coaching, and now Accelerate as our
Right.
group coaching program. It's been quite the non-linear journey, has it not?
It has. It has. I want to throw you a curveball because I know we talked about how what's the best way to introduce this, and I got a little bit inspired last night. So if you'll indulge me, I wanted to do just a little bit of a comparison between what was going on about 100 years ago and what we're faced with now. So if you think about it, a little over, and this is like why Accelerate, why choose something like Accelerate? Um, Not only do we have some really great processes that help people grow and change and succeed, hence Success Story program, but we have a view, we have a point of view about why it's important to do that. And it's not just about getting better as humans or making more money or getting promoted. There's something else kind of going on here. So if you go a little more than a century ago, the Industrial Revolution was in full swing. If you worked in a factory or anywhere in the Industrial Revolution, you lived right next to where you worked. You, you used company credit to buy groceries and other goods at the company store. You basically lived and worked for the company. Uh, and you can even see that happening right now, still in China. They still have some vestiges of that way of operating there. But even though there's obvious problems with the setup, there there's a there's a fusion. I mean, what makes it an obvious problem is that life and work are kind of fused. It's sort of not healthy, but you also got something from that, right? Like they did take care of you. You had a pension. Like there was more of a family vibe, I suppose you could argue. A kind of a we space that they created with each other, but the downsides, certainly outweighed the upsides. So now let's just fast forward. So we'll go from the Industrial Revolution to the Information Revolution, which is now in full swing. Computing, computing creates a platform for digital currency, for AI, for automation, and none of that is linked to a company. It's not even linked to a government. I mean, governments are kind of scrambling. What are we going to do about digital currency? So they have all these, currencies that are now linked to theirs. But we're now these autonomous agents. There's no more allegiance to a company. There's no more pension programs. Even 20 years ago, if you worked for 5 different companies in 7 years and you had that on your resume, people would be like, "Oh, what's the problem?" that's not the case anymore. So this pendulum has really swung in the other direction from sort of being overly community oriented, where the community is just your work and your community are like kind of the same thing, to being overly autonomous. So you could say the first system, the downside was it's very incestuous, but the downside of what's emerging now, what's in full swing now, is that we are dissociated.
Yeah,
So
very much atomized.
exactly. And that frame is why we started Accelerate, because young professionals today, they don't know what they're missing. They don't realize that 30 years ago, there was more care and concern and an effort put into your development, because the assumption was that you're going to be here. But that assumption is no longer valid. And so, I think many people kind of are intuiting this, that they're kind of on their own when it comes to their own professional development. And it's like, yep, you are on your own. And it's not just you and your company. It's not just you and your culture. This is around the world. We've gone from that way of doing things over 100 years ago to this way of doing things 100 years later. And there's no solution yet. I just noticed there's not a whole lot of bridges between this hyper differentiated, you're an autonomous agent, and professional development. Anyway, so that's my historical context that I hopefully sets the tone here for what it is we're up to, shows people that not only do we have a program that works, but we have a point of view about why it works. And that reason is, the diagnosis is not good. Everyone's dissociated, but there is a way out and a way forward.
So if I can just reflect back to you what I'm hearing here, based on that trajectory, where we are now is that most companies don't have robust employee development and growth programs on offer, because they view the employees as inherently transitory. And so why invest in people that probably aren't going to be here next year, much less 5 years or 10 years from now? And on the other side of the equation, you have a lot of employees, professionals, that rather than having a career progression be a clearly evident series of steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, there really isn't a clear sense of what's next and how do I grow in my career. There isn't an escalator, there aren't stairs, there's not a guardrail, there's no guidelines. And so there's sort of both sides of this dilemma are equally sort of frustrated about what does it mean to be able to grow as a free agent working professional, but also for companies, how do we help the people here perform at a higher level by giving them something actionable that they can do that isn't some sort of 5-year plan, but is a shorter timeline. And that's where our Success Story program really covers the sweet spot in addressing both sides of that challenge. Is that a fair synopsis?
Very, very fair. I mean, there's always the exceptions, right? There are always some really good leaders, really good managers who will form a personal relationship with one or two members of their team. And so then you have an advocate. The problem is, just the math alone, right? How many leaders versus how many people who are supporting leaders? It's ridiculous how many people, right? So there's only so many proteges that they can take on. But if you have that personal connection, then you probably will get professional development. But for the other 98% of the people, they are kind of like sort of left to their own devices. There's some good HR departments, there's some good trainings, but really, even if you are ushered into something like that, the expectation from the people who put you into those programs is that you are the one defining what the success is, and you are the one creating the means to integrate all that learning into your workflow. So, good luck with all of that is
Right.
kind of the message. They have done their job. They get to say that you've done your job. What is the cash value in terms of workflow? that's been really hard for people to calculate, so they just don't calculate it. And then
Right.
it just continues on like that.
Excellent. So I want to use that as a good segue to pivot from who we help. We help high potential performers reach their next level of leadership success. And we indirectly help companies. We work with companies also. They'll often put a whole cohort of their team through one of our programs. But most importantly, we focus on the actual individual in front of them with their biography, their challenges, their opportunities, their ecosystem of relationships. That's where the real work happens. So when we look under the hood of what do we help them do, I think it's critical for us to share here. We're not just helping them add additional leadership skills as a sort of bolt on me plus now this new thing. This is a different challenge here. This is a support of vertical development of a more of a transformational growth versus a additive or sideways growth or skill development. It's more of a whole different leadership level access. Can you unpack a little bit of what that difference is between these horizontal skills and that vertical growth? Because I think that's something that's going to be important for folks listening here.
Yeah. So there is a change to be made when you do something like learn how to use Excel. But you don't really need to change how you see your work from beginning to end. That doesn't need to change when you learn how to use Excel. So learning Excel is a skill, as you put it, like a kind of a horizontal skill, an add-on, a bolt-on, something like that. So it can help you grow in terms of your breadth. But depth, perspective taking, that's more like vertical growth. And that does require you to step back from how you look at yourself and your work and gain or grow the capacity to look at things in different ways. And this can be anything from very annoying to terrifying, depending on, what it is that you're working on, because vertical growth or true transformation does require you to change some part of who you are, and almost always that involves something that you have taken for granted as a necessary safety mechanism, like, hey, I gotta be a team player. If I'm not a team player, then I'm gonna be, every culture has a different version of this, but like the flower that grows too tall and that gets its
the red poppy, I think. The tall poppy, yeah.
Right. So that's one of the most common, because you see that phrase in many different cultures around the world. So we already know that some of this stuff is universal. So better be a team player. You can see how there's like a safety mechanism just built into the assumptions that people have about work. And that's very difficult to work on, but that's what we're taking the challenge ourselves. Accelerade Success Story program is all about identifying what the most common versions of that are, because that's where you will get the most amount of growth.
Yeah, I love how you sort of put some color into that experience of, I know I should do this and I've seen it be successful and it's worked for me, and it feels frustrating. There's tension here. I feel like I'm getting something, but I'm giving something up, and
Yeah.
it's an ongoing. When that tension or that challenge seems to be more pervasive or sort of like showing up across multiple contexts, that's where we've really seen that as a great indicator, as a vertical growth opportunity versus just a problem to be solved. And I love how you used Excel as a horizontal skill versus Accelerade, which is that vertical growth. Well played. We did not script that. Well played. So who we help, we've covered what we help them do. Now, how do we help them do it? I think is really worth a few minutes here. Some of these programs that are available out there is they teach you about something. Oh, you're going to learn about this. You're going to learn about that. And it's much more of an informational. The technical term for that is it's propositional knowledge. You're learning about something.
Oh, you're getting all philosophical on me.
This may be great for like answering a multiple choice quiz or taking a test to show you know your stuff about the certification.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, knowing about has minimal actual experiential impact when it comes knowing from by doing, and to the word you used earlier, perspective. What do you know as a result of this participatory knowledge gained by doing and this perspectival knowledge gained from the doing itself and from the learning from that new side, the other side of that experience? For an example, you could read a book all about swimming and you could know all the records and all the techniques and of the different strokes. And then you get pushed off the pier and like, now what do you know about swimming? And then how are you going to teach somebody else? Like you can't do, how are you going to be a good swimmer? That only comes from getting wet versus reading a book and knowing the facts. So our program is designed to put you into the participatory framework by doing experiments on some of the things and those moments, those context places where you feel that friction. And these experiments are designed to help you turn that friction into traction so you can make that slow, steady, but more permanent type of vertical growth that's going to lead to your next level of leadership success. So why don't you share just a little bit about what that experimental framework we supply, what that looks like for the participant side? And I'd love to hear you kind of maybe share an example or two of what a real world example would look like.
Yeah. So you really set me up here for the states versus structures frame of like, why engage in incremental change? What's the value? Hey, you two smart founders of Accelerade, how come you don't offer a Saturday workshop, right? Like, hey, well, instead of paying you this money to run this cohort of 6 people through your success story program, just come on by, for 2 days, we'll put you up for the night. And what you and I know, is that this kind of activity where you bungee jump into places results in a state change. So people are getting information, experiencing a different kind of state of consciousness. Oh, I can look at work like that. That's interesting. And I can look at work like this. That's also interesting. Whether it's about personality type or whether it's about, getting better organized or stress reduction programs, there's many people whose checks all get cashed after a few days, and there's not a whole lot of auditing a month later about the stickiness of that program. In fact, when I was in business school, that was the biggest problem was the stickiness of training. This is all the way back in the late 2000s. There's been no solutions. The solutions are, I think, what you and I are doing, which is, anyone who's more interested in joining you and doing something that's about incremental change, because state changes can happen very quickly, but they don't necessarily result in changes of structure. So structures are those parts of, in this context, what we mean by structure is your enduring way of thinking. It is a way of thinking that doesn't often change. Maybe 5 times in your life, including from when you were a baby. Maybe 5 times you have changed like this at a structural level. 3 of those are during childhood, right? The transition from being an infant to a toddler, the transition from being a toddler to being like a child, and then the difference of being a child to being like a teenager. Those are 3 kind of deep sort of structural transformations rather that you're going through. And this is, Robert Keegan, his life's work has been all about showing that just because we stop growing vertically in a physical sense does not mean we stop growing vertically psychologically, that you can continue your vertical development, and that's definitely involves a structure change, not a state change. So the incremental nature of the Success Story program is designed to catch that wave, the wave of enduring change that requires more than information. Like you pointed out, you can give someone an idea or a book or whatever. Are they going to translate that later on? Are they going to continue using that after the state change? The realization can be wonderful and it feels great. Okay, but will they continue using it? There's not a lot of books like that where the wisdom is so amazing and simple that it makes its way to that deep structure layer. It's not impossible, but I think it's very rare. What we know works is behaving slightly differently in a way that irritates you. Like it irritates me to stand out and be slightly less of a team player, to continue the example that we've been using. Good, because now I can actually learn something. I've been making sure for so long that I don't do that. I literally have no idea what it would actually mean to do it. I've been carrying around this base consciousness, this deep structure, right? This pattern for so long, unquestioningly. So, then you and I come along and we say, well, let's question those things. And so the 6 leadership challenges are really about what are the really good ones to question, the ones that bear the most transformational fruit.
Excellent. All right, so that's our great overview of Accelerade's Success Story program. We take a leadership challenge. We help you and do these experiments for you to get that permanent learning. I love Dave's example of the bungee jump, because what happens after you go down is you pop right back up, slightly damp if you're jumping off a bridge into a river, but you're still connected to the bridge. You're not swimming. So this is a great overview of our experiential practice-based program. And keep up with our next conversation where we'll jump into those 6 core leadership challenges.
Excellent.